Hey everyone, welcome back to The Sensitivity Doctor. This is Dr. Amelia Kelley, and today I had a compelling conversation with none other than Kate Anthony. She is the host of the Divorce Survival Guide, and boy, does she have some passion for the topic we talk about today. How do you know if you are in a narcissistic relationship with someone? And how do you get out? This is a conversation you don't want to miss. She and I unpack so many intricacies of narcissism that oftentimes go misunderstood. And I really feel like you're going to walk away with not only a great understanding of what it is and what it looks like, but also how to get the hell out of a relationship with someone like that. It is not your responsibility to take care of this person, and we're going to break down how you can take care of yourself. Enjoy. So we are here today to talk about how to figure out you are in a relationship with a narcissist and then how to get the hell out. Mm-hmm. And when I thought about this topic, honestly, you are someone that was top of mind because I know it's a big passion for you. So can you share with people listening who want to know how to do this themselves, why this matters to you, who you are, and just what your thoughts are to get us going?
Yeah. All right. Well, why it matters to me is that I experienced it. But when I went through it, it was 2008, 2007, like 6, 7, 8. Well, I mean, look, I met my ex-husband in 1998. So, and he was diagnosed. You know, this isn't just me being like, he's a narcissist. Like, no, he was diagnosed by our couples therapist as a narcissist. And interestingly, but at that time, we were not having these conversations. It was so confusing because I really didn't understand what was happening to me. And, you know, as you talk about, Amelia, and have written about the sort of cultural gaslighting that was happening, it was like there was no conversation about this. There were no podcasts, there was no Instagram. Facebook was, you know, kittens and puppies and your children. And there were not real like cultural conversations happening around this. And so when we were in couples therapy, what our therapist said to us was, so Kate, you're codependent, and David, you're a narcissist. So you guys should go home and start to like do some research and learning about those things. And there was no news to me that I was codependent. I had been, in Al-Anon for, at that point, almost a decade. So, like that was ongoing work that I was doing. And my ex-husband went home and he Googled narcissism. And the only thing that came up was information about narcissistic personality disorder, which everyone agreed he did not have, right? So, and then it was just sort of dropped, right? So then he went to the therapist and he was like, yeah, the only thing I could find was about NPD. Like, I don't think I have that. And our therapist said, no, you don't have that. And that was it. That was literally the end of the conversation. And so it took another like many years for me to actually understand what was happening. It was long after my divorce, actually, that I started to really understand what was happening. And as I was doing the work that I now do, helping women out of toxic and abusive relationships, most of them narcissistic abuse.
Right.
And then I was able to identify and pinpoint it. And I thought, good God, if I had had this information back then, I would not have felt so crazy. I would not have felt so powerless. I wouldn't have always felt like it was my fault and it was me and I was the problem, which is how I felt all the time. But I continued to feel crazy in my relationship. I continued to feel like I was the problem because one of the things that narcissists are so very good at in relationships is, making you feel like you're the problem, number one, but doing it in such a way, it's not, the other thing that was confusing to me at the time, and I think continues to be confusing, is that if you look up the signs of emotional abuse, even on some of the more reputable domestic violence hotline websites, it will still have very overt examples. Tells you that you're not good
Still,
enough.
geez.
Right. Tells you that you're not good enough. Tells you that, you'll never find anybody else. Tells you, like, most of them are just
Yeah.
not that overt. And
Right. Like they're not writing what gives you a nasty look.
right. I mean, well, they're also not talking about, the way that like my ex would do it. He would sort of be like, no, that's right. You know what? You're totally right. That is something I have to work on. And I'm really taking a deep look at that. I really am in my work. But what I want to talk about in this part of the conversation is how you da 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 da, right? And he's actually not
Right.
doing any of that
Deflecting
work.
blame.
Right. And he's
Right.
not doing any of that work, by the way, because it never, ever changes. What he's actually doing is like sort of what I would say is that I would say he would cop to like the front 5% so that you would think that he was actually doing like the work, when I would be like, but why are you talking to me that way? And why are you, and he'd be like, no, you're right. You're right. I didn't need to say it that way. And I'm working on that. But he was never working on it because it went on for 10 years or longer, actually, well into my divorce.
Right.
And so, that's sort of why it matters to me. It matters to me because if I can streamline the process, if I can cut to the chase, if I can like help women sort of cut to the heart of the matter really quickly, they won't waste, the decade that I did trying to understand what was happening. And that's really what I do now. And that's how I help women and what I do with them, because it's important. It is important. And also
Absolutely.
it is rampant. And, maybe 5 years ago, we were having these conversations and people were saying like, oh, everybody, everyone says they're divorcing a narcissist. Not everyone's a narcissist, yada, yada, yada. Well, frankly, I think there are far more of them in the world than we ever thought or knew about. They're not diagnosed, that something like 1% of the population is diagnosed as having NPD. Well, that's because most of them aren't seeking treatment. And the ones that do get diagnosed,
True.
right, they don't think anything's wrong with them. So
I think in the 10,000 hours of therapy I've conducted, I have had one single submission form come my way with someone who says, I am a narcissist and I need help. And it was one out of thousands.
But even they knew it. So what
I know. And you better believe I worked with them.
Wow. And the thing that I learned in my research for my book too was that most of the people who are diagnosed with NPD go in for other things.
Yep.
And this is like a co-diagnosis, right? So they're going in because they have, an addiction. And, as part of their addiction treatment, they are then diagnosed as NPD, which, God love them. But so my point is, we can't take those numbers as being, factual. And I think with our current cultural climate in the United States, there's a lot of normalizing of some really messed up behaviors. And, a lot more people, I think, are behaving in ways that are narcissistic, let's say.
Well, could I ask you to decipher that for someone
Sure.
listening who is wondering if they're in a relationship with someone who is one? You had said your ex-husband didn't necessarily meet criteria for full-blown personality disorder, but he is a narcissist. And if I was someone who didn't know anything about this and I'm listening, I'd be a little confused.
Okay, great. No, that's a great question. I mean, look, so narcissism is a spectrum. We all have a little bit on the, a healthy amount of self-esteem or self-perception on the lower end. And then on the very, very far end is narcissistic personality disorder. But there's all sorts of stuff
Right.
in between on the spectrum, right? And so, I like to give the example of my mother as being sort of a benign narcissist, right? And, my mom is like emotionally stunted or total arrested development at like the age of 7. So she has like the emotional life of a 7-year-old, and she has always parentified me and made, now it's even worse in her old age. She is like, oh, she's helpless. And this woman has a PhD and she still works and she's not helpless at all. But when it comes to me, she is helpless.
I love the term benign narcissist. It's very interesting.
Right? Like she doesn't have ill will. She does not have ill intent, but everything is about her. She is so self-focused. She is so, I would say like, oh, I hurt my back. And she'd say, oh, well, you just did that because I had a back injury, or like everything is just self-referential. Now, and as a child, this was really damaging because I didn't have, she only viewed me as an extension of herself, which is a very common narcissistic thing. It's you're either an extension of them or a reflection of them. And
Right.
She viewed me solely as an extension of herself. So I never learned to individuate as a child. Right. So that's sort of the more like benign-ish. It's still very damaging, especially when they're your parent. And then further along the spectrum are the more like maybe like my ex-husband who, saw me as a reflection of himself. And so was always critical of me, always. Essentially, the thing about the narcissist is, and it's the main thing that differentiates them from, say, sociopaths or people with antisocial personality disorder, is that they have no self-esteem. So a narcissist has no self-esteem. A sociopath has very, very solid self-esteem. But essentially, a narcissist thinks that they're the biggest piece of shit in the universe. So they're attempting to derive their sense of self from you. And when it doesn't work, because it can't,
Right. Nor should it.
nor should it, then you're the problem and it's your fault and you are bad and wrong. And so all of the criticism that I would get was like my voice. He told me he hated the sound of my voice once. I promptly lost my voice for 4 days. Couldn't figure out why I couldn't speak.
Oh my goodness. That's some chakra stuff right there.
Right?
Pepper.
I mean, right?
Quite literally.
He would bristle at me whenever I would talk. He would, he would criticize my body. He would, the criticisms were endless. And we went to a party and we would leave and I would be sort of given the litany of things that like, but if you had just done it this way and like, why did you say that? That was really weird. Or because part of his childhood wounding or whatever was his dad was very socially awkward and very, I think ultimately we might say at this point that he might have been on the spectrum. So there was a lot of social stuff that was
shame.
But for my ex-husband, so much shame and so much embarrassment, right? And so if he perceived anything as being, quote, off with me, which by the way, like I'm pretty socially good. Like I'm not.
Yeah, I would say so. Right? I find you pleasant.
Thank you, Amelia. But I would be told all of the little, if I could just adjust it this way or adjust it that way, and then adjust it that way. And I would feel like, and I would say to him, I feel like you want me to be a robot that you can program. You don't actually want me to be me. You want me to be the version of me that you have molded to make yourself feel good. And what I didn't understand at the time was that there was no program that would ever make him feel good. And I would just always only be in trouble.
Right.
And so I guess, but again, this piece is like where he falls on the spectrum is not full-blown narcissistic personality disorder.
Well, because when you just said that you were able to say to him, do you just want me to be a robot? Like you were able to speak up. My internal trauma therapist part of me bristled in my own way a little like, oh, that was a risky thing to say. But I think because I'm so used to working with people who are with malicious narcissists.
Exactly. Yes. And so the thing
Right.
and the thing about my ex is that he would hear that and be like, no, I don't want that. That's like, no, not like, oh God, I don't want you to feel that way. That's terrible. Like, not that.
Yeah, no empathy. Right.
No empathy. No empathy. And but yeah, like further down on the line, the narcissistic personality disorder, the malicious, they actually they're way more cruel about it. Because they kind of have less of a filter, right? They have less of a
Right.
social filter, or, they think they can't get in trouble. It is, I think, and tell me, I mean, you're the diagnostician, but, I think the narcissistic personality disorder is closer on this, if this part is the spectrum, to the antisocial personality disorder. It's like the tips over it. There's like
I could see
a
that. Yeah.
closer correlation to that.
Right, because with antisocial personality, there's a lack of care for the norms, for those interpersonal norms, and a lot of what narcissists do to protect their self-esteem is not socially acceptable. Like if you, it makes you cringe, balk, roll your eyes, all the things if you actually were like, a fly in the room watching these things play out.
Which
And
which is so
yeah,
utterly fascinating because, for all of my exes, poor guy, but for all of my exes, eagle eyes on me and like my weird behavior, he was the one who was acting completely insane, right? So for all of his like being concerned about other people's embarrassing behavior, he was the one who was acting very embarrassing. And I think that's a bizarre, it's sort of like a weird thing that ended up happening, right? It's like, well, what you resist persists, first of all, right? You're the one doing it.
right.
And as the narcissist, right? There's the blame shifting, like anything that they're blaming you for, they're the ones probably doing, right?
Well, and I am happy that earlier you did say something about the fact that we all have some narcissistic tendencies. It's part of
Yeah.
being self-preserving. I often remind people that we want a 1-year-old to be narcissistic.
That's right.
So they can survive, right? And
Yep.
and as we continue to move forward in life, the hope is we become less so in our relationships. And one other thing, like I love how you're talking about it as a spectrum, and I'm happy that conversation has been happening more because I think it doesn't have to be an on-off switch. I think that's why people were getting so disgruntled about it
Yeah.
because it felt like, okay, well, you don't care about me, you care about yourself, so suddenly you have this disorder. But then there's this other subcategory of insecure versus grandiose.
Yes.
And that's more like diagnostic. So I'm wondering what you think about where those fall on the spectrum.
Well, I feel like in most narcissists, I feel like they're pretty, and again, you're the expert at this. They're pretty simultaneous, right? So
That's right. That's why I struggle with that, like kind of on off switch with even that.
yeah, because
honestly.
I think that, like I said, they think that they're the biggest piece of shit in the room. They think that they have the lowest self-esteem, no self-esteem, coupled with this bizarre grandiosity. They are so the entitlement. I think that one of the biggest hallmarks of narcissism is entitlement. They're entitled to your time. They're entitled to your body. They're entitled to your labor. They're entitled to your love. They're right. And the minute they perceive you to be withholding any of that, then you are a problem. You are wrong. You are bad. You're in trouble. Suddenly, like, they're an incel, right? Like, they're involuntarily celibate because they're entitled to your body, right?
Well, and they're entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, that's right.
That's that twist of words, because of course we're all entitled to our opinion, but is it at the expense of my sense of reality? Like, is my entitlement to my opinion as a narcissist worth me and my justification for gaslighting you in this situation.
And to them, yes, absolutely. Right? Because it's only about getting their needs met. That's all it's about for them. It has nothing to do with empathy or generosity or meeting your needs or being present in a relationship. Like, there is no relationship with a narcissist. So, look, one of the hallmarks of being in a relationship with a narcissist is that you're the one who's always doing the work. You are the one who's like, well, let's go to therapy, or, I will change. Like, you change over time. You bend yourself and twist yourself into pretzels trying to be the thing that they keep telling you that you should be in order to make everything okay. Except as soon as you hit the target that they just told you was what they needed, the target moves, right? And
Right.
you're willing, because you are in this relationship for love and connection, you are willing to do whatever it takes to maintain that. Whereas they're in it for power, for control. They're in it for themselves. They're in it for their needs. And so it's not a relationship. There's nothing relational about this. Right? So if you feel like you're always doing the work, if you feel like you're always the one who's to blame, if you feel like you can't do anything right, if you feel like no matter how hard you try, you're always you're always missing the mark, chances are you're in a relationship with a narcissist.
So the get the hell out portion of the episode. So we know now, someone listening right now might be having that light bulb moment, or you call it watershed moment.
Yeah. Or my frying pan moment is what
frying pan moment, that you may in fact be in a relationship with a narcissist, whether it be malicious, whether it be grandiose, whether it be even benign. It's okay to not want to be in a relationship with a benign narcissist as well.
Yeah. Well, again, because
Like,
it's still
it doesn't have
not
to
a
be
relationship.
Exactly. Oh, yes. Thank you for clarifying and like hammering in on that. So let's say you're in it.
Yeah.
How do you get out?
Well, I mean, the first thing to know is that once you have this moment of clarity and understanding, the very last thing that you need to do is go to them and be like, I figured it out. It's because you're a narcissist.
Yeah. Probably not going to go over well.
Well, it won't, for a variety of reasons. This information is for you, right? The aha moment is for you. And there is a period before any action, because what we want to do, because we love this person, we love them. We love the mask that they presented to us when we first started dating them, when we fell in love with them. There was this whole thing, and that's what we fell in love with. And it's the thing we keep trying to like get back to without recognizing that, like, oh no, actually this is the person. All of this other stuff is the person, and that was the mask. And so the first thing I think to do is to sit with that before you do anything, because there is this sort of coming to terms with it that takes a while. And I think is really important, right? Because our first impulse is to say, oh, wait, I figured it out, so now I can fix it. Because we want the same thing. We want us to be happy. We want this, and we do not want the same thing at all. And that's what's so hard to wrap your head around. That, like, in a sense, you're like, but is my whole life a lie? And what? Right? And no, your life is not a lie. You have been honest. But this person is not who you thought they were. And that's really hard pill to swallow. And that's going to take a lot of therapy, right? First, before doing anything about it.
Right.
Yeah. And then to move on to like doing something about it, right? There's first the absorbing and the kind of just being with this. And then there's, okay, let's take the action. And I always go back to, in like 12-step programs, and Al-Anon in particular, they talk about the 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and action. And when we go from awareness to action, we're skipping over the most important part, which is the acceptance. And I think that that's what I'm talking about here. That's the kind of dip in the like, oh, wait, don't do anything yet.
Right.
Sit with this. Let it marinate. Start to notice. Once you've identified it, then you start to kind of see it everywhere. And then it will help you emotionally begin to detach. And then, getting out is, look, for any abuser. So in my opinion, all narcissists are abusive. Not all abusers are narcissists.
Can you say that again? Because I feel like that's super important.
Yeah. All narcissists are abusive. But not all abusers are narcissists. Some of them are sociopaths. Some of them are just shitty people who have been, culturized. I don't even know if that's a word. But have
culturalized.
They've been molded by
Marinated.
Yeah, they've been molded by the culture that we live in. But all narcissists are abusive by default. And so you want to be really careful. Getting out of a narcissistically abusive relationship, leaving any abusive relationship can be dangerous. And the most dangerous time is when we leave. So we have to make sure that there's a safety plan in place and that you really do know. In my case, leaving my ex, because he wasn't just so far out on the spectrum, because he cares so much what other people think of him, he was now going to be the best divorced guy in the world and the best divorced dad in the world, right? Which worked in my favor.
Yeah.
He didn't escalate his abuse.
Yeah, I mean, better than worst, but yes.
Right. He didn't escalate his abuse. He just became and we became best friends way too quickly because that was, again, he was driving the train, right? So even in a best case, I still want people, and I work with my clients, to really separate emotionally for a while. Again, because that was the mistake I made, and it became very clear to me later on what my mistake was. And that was not differentiating and not sort of figuring out who I was and intentionally choosing a friendship with this person from my healed, differentiated place. And it was just sort of like, oh, we're going to do this now. Cool. And it was not good for anybody, including our son, who was really confused because he was really little.
Well, and I could see, during that time where you're marinating and you're feeling it out and you're accepting that if you don't take time to do that, it would be so much easier for them to swoop you back in quicker because you haven't had time to create your own essence of personality and feeling and ego strength and soul connection and all the things that kind of get put to the side when you're catering to the needs of a narcissist.
That's right. 100%. And my ex was never trying to get me back. But what it did was it left me vulnerable to his abuse, which continued just in a little bit of a different form now that we weren't together all the time. And it took me another 5 years before I sort of severed that tie so that I could, okay, now we're parallel parenting. So I believe everyone, even in the most amicable divorces, should start, if they have children, with parallel parenting. Start with
which is?
So the difference between co-parenting and parallel parenting is that you're literally only talking about, in parallel parenting, you're just communicating about the children and only when necessary. In co-parenting, there's more friendly vibe and, you might go into each other's houses, you might share a holiday, that kind of thing. But I would say for the first year or two, just do the parallel parenting. And yeah.
I was going to say, I find it very tricky with clients of mine that I work with. I have one in particular I'm thinking of where she has to coordinate these phone calls because he's international and her kids are very young. So she has to kind of be and has to, this is part of their agreement and
Yeah.
it is what it is at this point. So she's there kind of like co-parenting to make this happen,
Yeah.
but in every other arena is wanting it to be parallel parenting. But because there's this kind of assault to the parallel parenting experience, it's making it, and he is absolutely a narcissist,
Mm-hmm.
but it's making it exponentially more difficult. So, I mean,
Yes.
even something as simple as last time I met with her, we were talking about these kind of contradicting desire versus the reality of what she has going on. And I asked her, "What are you doing during the phone calls?" And she said, "Well, I'm holding the phone." And I said, "Okay. So you're like so intimately, like you're literally feeling the vibrations of him talking
Yeah.
on the phone."
Yeah.
So we came up with the plan. I mean, her kids are little, like 2 and 4.
Right.
Okay. So it's appropriate for her to be there. And so we came up with a plan of her even energetically separating herself. She loves to read. So, like, maybe going in a corner, being separate, and just like
Absolutely.
reading a book she enjoys so that she's there but not there. Like, it sounds so simple, but anything to kind of energetically separate yourself from the narcissist.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're around the narcissist, no matter what, and actually, I'm curious your thoughts on this. No matter how much healing you have done, I find that when in the presence of the narcissist, who was the initial kind of assailant, I guess,
Mm-hmm. Totally.
you can still physically, energetically, somatically feel like some of that healing never happened.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. And that's part of why I want this parallel parenting thing. Like, you can't heal from trauma you're still
Right.
experiencing. And when you have to co parent with an
Yes.
abuser, you are constantly being put in a position of being re traumatized. And
Right.
by the way, I am a strong opponent of mandated like daily phone calls or whatever during parenting
Yeah,
time.
I wouldn't have picked it for her either. The
Well, because
situation is so complex
it's
to
not for the
unpack, but
kids. It's certainly not for the kids, right?
right.
Like
Agreed.
pulling the children out of their lives every day or once a week or whatever it is, pulling them out in order to like have a good night phone call or like that's not about them. That's not for them. They don't want that. Right. So I believe that all of the phone calls should be child directed, child led. You know, if a child says, "Hey, I want to talk to daddy," the answer should always be yes. But but it's always the narcissist who demands all of these calls, sometimes daily. And it's not because of the kids, it's because very often they'll use it to pry for information. They'll use it to scan the room. Oh, mommy has two wine glasses oh, I noticed you had two wine glasses in the dish rack. Who did you have somebody over? Um, right? Or whatever it is, right? It's never about the children. It's about whatever information they can get. It's whatever
Right.
insertion into your life and your happiness and your rhythm. So yes, you're gonna pick that up energetically, and it can be dangerous. It's not healthy for anybody, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that advice of recognizing, like, even if it ends up getting put in the mandate,
yeah,
just knowing, even just I think mentally knowing who it's for, I feel like it kind of relieves the pressure a little bit because I find she sometimes feels like she's supposed to make sure the kids are engaging and all of this. And it's like, well, what if you step back and it's just the kids doing whatever they're going to do?
that's right.
But that's her feeling like she has to fix and solve and walk on the eggshells around the situation. And this is fully divorced, fully separated, living in different countries. And that's kind of to my point
Yeah,
that if you're listening to this and you have left a narcissist or you're trying to leave a narcissist, just know that the narcissist is going to be it's kind of like the
hmm,
poison that makes you feel sick when you're around it. Like, you're not going to not have poison come back and have poison and not feel sick just because you've been away from it. Like they will make you feel ill
That's right.
around them, even if time has passed.
Yes.
And I hate when people think they haven't healed enough or they haven't moved on enough because, oh man, this person still triggers these negative reactions. Of course they trigger those negative reactions because they're the poison.
That's right. That's exactly right. I love putting it in those terms that they're the poison. And I have one of my most popular podcast episodes is an episode I did in the very beginning of my show, and it's I'm gonna say bad words on your show.
It's fine.
It's called
I think I said shit during my last episode, so we've ripped off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, I think I already said it too. But it's called Not Your Fucking Job. And it is sort of a litany of all the things that are not your fucking job. It is not your fucking job to make sure that your children are engaged in a phone call with the other parent. If you're not engaging, then that's on you. That's your relationship with your children. It is not my fucking job to, be the, to make sure that your kids are engaged with you, or that, or to sort of foster your relationship with your children. That's your job. It's your relationship.
So can I ask you then, if she knows this, I'm thinking of this one person in particular. Sure. She knows this. She's believing it. She's deciding, she's believing it in the moment. She's deciding it's not her job. Mm-hmm. And then he claps back at her, making her feel like it's her job. Of course she does. Of course he does. What would you tell someone in that position? Because I feel like that's something that holds a lot of people back from leaving or from staying out, especially.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know. He says it is your job, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it takes time to start to see all of the patterns, because you think that oh, I'm divorced and now it's all going to stop. Nah. It just changes shape and it goes more covert, right? One of my favorite lines is, you're not being a collaborative co-parent with me. Or, we need to present a unified front in parenting. From a narcissist, right? Yes. You know what? All things being equal, that is an ideal, right? But what a narcissist is not saying, let me hear your point of view. I will process it. Maybe you're right. Can I share my point of view? Maybe we can come to some agreement, some middle ground. No. When a narcissist says to you, we need to present a unified front to our children, what they're saying is you need to get on board with me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's what they're saying. So in any other circumstance, when someone is that manipulative, you would not go back into the relationship with them. You would not get closer to them. You would say, that's a need for a stronger boundary, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing about boundaries that we all struggle with is that we think we're doing a really good job when we set a boundary. Setting a boundary is not boundaries. It's the holding the boundary in the face of the resistance.
Oh, I love that.
That is the boundary work, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That's so good.
Yeah, right? Because it's easy for me to be like, I really appreciate it if you would not talk to me that way.
Right.
But when they continue to talk to you that way, what are you going to do about it?
Absolutely.
And that's where the boundary is. Are you willing? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to get up and walk out of the room? Are you willing to say, you know what? Our children are actually not available to you tonight. Are you now, if it's a court order, that should never be in a parenting plan, by the way. And so a lot of people put that in their parenting plan because it sounds like a good, that sounds reasonable, right? They don't think it through. they don't think through what that really means and who it's actually for. It's
I mean,
actually
it
for
means
me.
uprooting your life most of the time, like all the
Right.
time.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. My Benji, my step-ish son, my son, my ex's, for the audience who doesn't know, Amelia knows very well. My ex's son, who's my son's half brother, from another relationship, his bio mom, he had to do a 7 o'clock call like every night with her, and it was court ordered.
That
And
would be
so
stressful.
7 o'clock, we're out to dinner as a family.
Yeah.
Benji has to now, at like 4 years old, we got to do this
Oh,
call. So they have to like go outside and go to the street and have
I
this
hate
like,
that.
2-minute
Yeah.
call because the court ordered it. Like, who's that for? That's not for Benji.
It's like manufactured intimacy,
That's
which
right.
does not sound healthy.
No, it's not. It's not. That's exactly what it is. It's not for the kid. That's for sure. Now, if in the middle of dinner, Benji was like, I really want to talk to my mom, absolutely, let's do it. Right? That
Right.
should be in the parenting plan or the court order, not
To
this
fully to
mandatory thing.
fully support any requests that the child has to reach out to their parent. I love that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
in terms of back to your client who had no idea she was going to be in the hot seat today. She,
I'm going to send her this episode.
yeah. It feels to me like it's when I talk about this all the time, that we do a really good job of physically divorcing, of financially divorcing, of legally divorcing, and the emotional divorce is the hardest part of this entire process. And it takes far longer, right? To like, oh God, look, there's another plug I have plugged into him. And rather than making yourself wrong for it, or making yourself feel bad, beating yourself up about it, I think what I would invite people to do is to just notice and be like, oh look, there's another plug. Damn it. Okay, let me unplug that one. And in 2 weeks, oh my God, how did that get plugged back in? Okay, let me just unplug it again, right? Just to keep noticing where and how you are emotionally plugged back into this person, and then give yourself, grace, right? Because of course you are, because they're just sitting there picking up all the plugs and shoving them in, right? That's what they
Right.
do. They love it until they get a new supply, right? This is what we talk about with narcissistic supply. They
Right.
thrive on it. They get off on this. They get off on it. And so if you are finding yourself still emotionally connected in this way, just know it's not your fault.
Right. It's very normal.
It's very normal. And unplugging and dropping the rope and removing yourself emotionally is the hardest part of the whole process. And you should be working with your therapist on this. You should be working with your coach on this if you have somebody who specializes in all this stuff.
If
I'm
only we
avail-
knew someone
If
who
only we
did.
knew
Yeah.
some two people, a therapist and a coach. It was such a dream team. So, right, I mean, Amelia literally wrote the book on, women healing from gaslighting. And I literally wrote the book on leaving your narcissist. So
Absolutely.
here we go. So but this is the hardest part, and you should be working with someone on this because you can't see it, right? Sometimes you can't see it. You think, oh, I'm holding the phone for my kids while they're, right? It takes someone outside to go, how does that feel for you? What's going on there, right? Because this is totally normal. This has become the air that we breathe.
I like that you're bringing that in as kind of like it's almost like the cherry on the top of, awareness, the acceptance piece, the action piece. But I think an overarching theme of all this is being witnessed and being held in some kind of container by others who are safe, who can give you that perspective, that sense of that mirroring of who you really truly are, and not the perception that the narcissist has.
That's right. That's right. And this is why we can repeat these patterns because if you've been in a long-term relationship with someone like this, the design of the relationship is that you lose your sense of self. So
Right.
it's not your fault that you've lost your sense of self. That's the design of this relationship. And it takes a long time to get it back, and working with a coach or a therapist to reflect and mirror who you really are, and for you to receive that and begin to recognize yourself in that, that's where the healing happens.
Absolutely.
So that when they start to do the thing again, you're like,
I see you. I know what you're doing.
and that's not me,
Yeah.
right? That's not me. I don't know who you're talking to.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Unplug.
Yeah.
Unplug.
Yes, exactly.
So for anyone listening today who is like, oh, okay, now I get it, or is thinking, gosh, I always got it, and now I finally feel like I can get there. What would be the next step you would want them to take? And then where could they connect with you maybe to kind of continue this conversation on beyond this episode?
So the next step, right, if we go from like awareness, acceptance, and then into action, I do want you to work with somebody, whether it's me or Amelia or anybody, any specialist in this, on creating an action plan that keeps you safe. I think having somebody who is an expert in this assess the danger level of you leaving is really important too. So that's really what I would want you to do. And I think the most important thing is that I want you to know that you're not alone, that you are not crazy, and there is help. And what you are experiencing is, unfortunately, incredibly common. And there is a solution. There really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so in terms of my work, my website is kateanthony.com, and everything I do is there. And my podcast is the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. We talk about this stuff all the time.
Which is an awesome podcast. I can definitely affirm. I've recommended it to so many clients. I have gotten clients that were listeners of yours who just happened to live near me, just kind of. And I will tell you a little insider scoop. It's almost like giving a promo code. If you say, hey, I heard you on Kate Anthony's podcast, you skip the whole wait list.
That's so good.
So there's your promo code.
There you go. Yes, Amelia has been on my show a few times, and will probably come back a few more times because we love having ththese conversations. So yeah,
Yes,
thanks
absolutely.
for having me on. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope everyone heard, something that they just were needing to hear today, and it's time to move forward and move on. So
It really is. You do not have to live like this, and you deserve to be happy.
definitely. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and be well.